Hello, welcome to our chat with Shawn Hanegan. He's running for a candidate of select board in the town of Bedford. Today, I want to welcome you. Let's just say I've known you for so many years, and I'm really pleased to hear that you're running for select board because you have spent so many years working on different committees throughout the town. And I just wanted to ask you a few questions to learn more about your candidacy. First of all, what made you think of running for select board?
Great. And first of all, before I start, thank you very much, Angela, for your time. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we go way back to the college days. So great to have this opportunity to have you interview me. What made me think about running for select board? It's been something that's, kind of been on my radar screen for a while. I've always had an interest in government. I've been fascinated with how government can really make a positive difference in people's lives. I stress the parts that can make the real beneficial impacts to people's lives. I remember way back, even in college, I was floor chair of our dorm floor for a couple of years. And then I studied political science as a minor. During the time out of college, I've spent time in the three different communities I've lived, just being part of town government and learning and seeing the impact it is. So I feel like now I have the experience and the connections to really step in and be effective in the role of select board member in Bedford.
Right. I remember the last time we talked, you were on the planning board and you have been on different committees throughout the town. So that must have given you a lot of different types of experiences and understanding how the town works and how to get things done.
Right. I'm still on the planning board until the town election. So I'm actually chairing it this year. And that has shown me a lot about how the town works because planning board touches so many aspects of town. And it also has taught me really or reinforced the quality of just being able to take a situation where there's contention because planning board can be very contentious. You're dealing with people's homes that are their primary property, their primary investment. You're dealing with some developments that are very, very visible to people in town. So a lot of cases you get into that situation where you can't make everyone happy. But what I can do is listen to everyone and learn from their perspectives and arrive at an outcome that at least treats people fairly. So I'm proud of the service on the planning board, and I've also had a lot of time on the community preservation committee and serving as chair for there for a few years, and housing partnership as well. So I've learned a lot about how different aspects of the community benefit from community preservation funds, historic preservation, affordable housing, and seen many different demographics in Bedford.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. We have a historical society over here in Berkeley. It's amazing to hear about the history of Berkeley. It was a farming town. So you've lived in Bedford for a while and you must know a lot of the history there. What kind of recommendations do you have for things to see around Bedford?
Sure. So that's a great question. I'm interested in learning about the history of any town. So someday I'd like to learn the history of Berkeley too. Bedford has a lot of history. So you hear a lot about Lexington and Concord and the American Revolution. Bedford is kind of the third hidden leg of that. So there's a lot of history here. There's still several buildings that stand that go back to the colonial times. In fact, the week before Patriots Day, at least in non-COVID times, we have our own version of the reenactment where we reenact somebody going to the top of a pole in the middle of a park and putting a cap on to signal defiance of the British, and the
Wow.
redcoats come and arrest them. But there's really great places where people that are interested in local history can visit. We have something called the Joe Blaine House, which is a salt box house that was built in the colonial era. And you can see how people lived back then. You can go and have tours and really, really fascinating. We have Depot Park, which at one point was a terminus of a railroad line to Boston.
Wow.
So back in the era where railroads were a lot more prominent than cars, it went straight into Alewife. Right now it's the Minuteman Bikeway. So it's kind of lived on in its use, but at the terminus, at least the current terminus of the Minuteman Bikeway, because it's planned to be extended into Concord, There's a shop where you can go and learn about local railroad history. They have a model railroad with Bedford sites in it. You
Wow.
can actually go into a refurbished old rail car. You turn on the sound and you hear the old stops being called, and you see the old switches and such. It's really a fascinating thing to see.
That's is so cool. I'm gonna have to come visit. I
Yes.
love trains. Okay, so definitely I want to ask you about your own history in Bedford. So you lived in Bedford for a while, right?
Right. I moved in about 10 and a half years ago.
You have two daughters that are in the schools there and your wife as well who works there. Do you have a lot of relatives and friends in this area? Like what made you
Yeah.
choose Bedford of all the places?
Yeah, both of my daughters are in the schools. My wife actually is a stay-at-home mother, but she does a lot of, volunteering and helping out in town. So I'm originally from Linfield, and my wife is originally from Dracut. So we wanted something that would stay close to both areas so the grandparents could be involved in the grandkids' life. Initially, we lived in Billerica when we first got married. That was our starter house. When we wanted to move to a permanent forever community, we really took a lot of time to look at different communities around, and we were really sold on Bedford because it has the great community feel. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about Bedford is if you look on it on a map, it has a very interesting profile. It almost looks like a circle. And the roads that come from the north and the south all converge and go through the center of town. It's called the Great Road, and that's where our common is and where a lot of shops are. And it's small enough that the kids actually go through the same school system. So there's no school districts. Everybody goes to the same K through 2 school, the Davis school, and then 3 through 5, they go to the Lane school, and then they go to the middle school and the high school. People in Bedford, much more than other towns our size, get an experience of having the same Bedford unified, which is really, really cool. And you see just so many times the town will come together for events. I mean, it's been said that you have a flu clinic in Bedford and people use it as an excuse to socialize. So it's still got that really small town feel, even though it's a suburb where a lot of people know each other and really care about each other and the town. And
Wow,
that came through even looking at houses. So that was what sold us on Bedford. It's been a great experience living here.
that's great. So the town of Bedford has a lot of things to offer residents. What do you feel needs the most help in your community? What kind of outreach are you planning? Since Bedford seems like it's got the charm of a small town with the amenities of a big town, there must be a lot of challenges.
Sure, and that's a great question. So one thing I want to say is that in my view, Bedford has been a well-run town. Running for, sometimes people run for office and is like, I want to change this and change that. And I want to establish that I think the town government is doing a good job and the select board has generally done a good job, but that's not enough, right? You can't say Bedford's a great town and then just kind of put it on the shelf and let it stay there forever. It has to keep being replenished. So we keep having to work, and of course there are demographic changes, there are changes in the economy. So of course Bedford will change, but we want to make it change in a way that people really buy into and it'll be beneficial. So one of the things I did on planning board was come up with a comprehensive plan that was subtitled The Bedford We Want. And that was back in 2013. And we've executed a lot of those changes. So things like bringing new businesses to town, new types of businesses, especially with the economic changes, what works in town, what doesn't work in town. Dealing with traffic is always a consideration. So of course, when Bedford was really expanding, the car was central, and Route 128 was built in the 50s, and there was a lot of the developments are car centric with the big parking lot. And we have a significant traffic problem, partly because of what I described with the roads flowing together. So that's a feature, and it's also kind of a challenge. As select board member, I want to help listen and figure out what it is that we as Bedford want, and then to help guide the changes that are inevitable, um, guide them in the right direction. So deal with there's definitely some traffic issues we have in town, which should be dealt with in a couple different ways. The volume of traffic really requires a lot of partnership with regional entities because a lot of it is cut through traffic. So I have a really great relationship with our state rep and state senator. And our state rep has already done a lot, just reconfiguring the interchange between 95 and Route 3, took a
Oh,
lot of the traffic off of Bedford roads. But things like that, additional public transit options, I think will help mitigate the traffic problems. And then dealing with some of the things like there's an area called Wilson Park, where unfortunately there's a pretty serious bike accident there recently with the husband of one of my planning board members, fellow members. And
dear.
we really want to address, that's something we can handle as a local level, is addressing the geometry of traffic. There's a few points in town that really have ill-configured intersections that aren't suited for the type of traffic. So that's going to be a big priority. And another thing I want to mention is there's a lot of polarization in the country overall and in the state. And I want to make sure I see that there's a lot of anger that's starting to come up in meetings recently. If you look at the social media, there's a lot of people that are, posting comments that show a certain degree of anger and, let's say, disenfranchisement.
Wow.
So I want to make sure that Bedford stays a cordial place to conduct town business. We have a very strong history of being able to disagree politely in forums, being able to be respectful of each other. And I feel like that may be under threat because of these pressures from outside.
Mhm.
So I want to do a couple things. First of all,
Mhm.
make sure that I'm always promoting respectful dialogue and listening to people, even if I disagree. And I would say that in my work in town, that I've shown that, in planning board, even in the contentious hearings and community preservation and the housing partnership, I've always worked with people of different ideologies, and we've come up with what's good for the town. And I also want to listen to the people that are feeling disenfranchised and not dismiss them, even if they're saying things that are very angry. And you say, why do you feel that way? What can we do to help bring more people into government in a respectful way so that there's not this pool of people that just feel so angry. I did that recently. There was kind of a contentious issue about a new building on the main street, and I saw some of the social media comments, reached out to people and really just kind of got a sense of what they were feeling, listened to them. Of course, I couldn't make everyone happy, but I think we made a fair amount of changes.
So you made
Just
an
by
effort
talking to people. I made an effort.
to people face to face to mediate.
Right,
And you need
exactly.
that. You need somebody who's not just looking at the two different sides, but to try and bridge the two different sides so that they can come to a conclusion that is mutually beneficial. That's
Exactly.
It's hard to find politicians that do that, by the way. I really commend you on that.
Well, thank you. And it is hard. It's so easy to get in one camp or the other. And of course, I have my own partisan affiliation. I mean, that's as everyone in government, they have, some people are more liberal, some people are more conservative. But I have worked with people regardless of their affiliation or ideology. And I definitely pledge to keep doing that.
Right. And do it in a respectful way, I'm sure.
Right.
That's great. So, so are these the people that you feel need the most help in your community, the people who feel like they're being disenfranchised? Or what do you take away as like the most important outreach that you would plan?
So I think that's one of them. The people that feel disenfranchised, I would certainly outreach to them and figure out how they can be more involved, even if they don't want to serve on boards or committees, but how their voices can be heard. Um, but if you use the term help, a couple things would come to mind. One thing is, even though Bedford's a relatively affluent town, we do have people here that do struggle to make ends meet. Um, And that's one thing I've promoted in my work in other committees before, is how do you help those people out? One thing I'm quite proud about is being on the Community Preservation Committee, where we piloted something called the Life Management Program, which was a way of connecting people in public housing with resources. And one of the best meetings that I ever attended was when someone came to us and said, because of your program, I was able to get a degree and I was able to better my life. And a lot of people have taken advantage of this and moved out of public housing and then made space for other people. So things like that, I want to keep doing. And as a select board member, I think that there's more of an opportunity to be tied in with potential grants, to work with regional agencies to help people like that. And I also want to not forget that I think a lot of people need help in terms of mental health, especially dealing with the pandemic. So I commend what Bedford Youth and Family Services is doing. We have a partnership where there's mental health presentations given quarterly on different topics. The schools are very tuned into that. And people can go and actually get free therapy from the Elliott Community Health Services.
Great.
So yeah, these types of things, I think all of these are examples of people needing help that I want to be attentive to.
And an example of the community caring for each other. It takes
Exactly.
a lot of oversight in order to structure that so that that support system is in place. I wish we had that. I don't think we have that in our small community. We have the library and the town hall in the center. And usually if you want to complain, you just go there and you complain. And then the people there are very helpful, of course, but it's not nowhere near official support. It's more like unofficial. But it makes me feel better.
That's good. And I know you do a lot of good work for your library, and that makes a difference.
Oh, yeah. Libraries are so important, especially with homeschooling and the pandemic. It's been one of the central tenets of our life in isolation, because we do virtual trivia nights with the library. Um, they have craft kits for the kids that you pick up, and the kids get to do the crafts at home because they used to do it at the library, but since they haven't been able to, it's been nice just to take it home and to create like a little birdhouse or masks for Halloween, little crafts like that.
That's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I'm sure that Bedford has a great library too.
Yeah, we're very proud of our library.
Yeah, yeah, local resources. I didn't realize how important it was to make sure that your town prioritizes that until I joined this town here in Berkeley. Every year there's some discussion, should we fund the library? And it's a difficult question, because when you have a small town that most of its resources go toward the school, you think, well, why do we need an extra resource for schooling when we already spend so much on these other school systems? And then you realize, well, the library is the only place that's open to everybody. You don't have to be school aged in order to go in. Everybody from the youngest to the most elderly people, they can go in and borrow a book. And we also do this thing where we cater to the elderly. So we have a bookmobile that drops off books at people's houses and stuff, which is kind of cool. It's important. For many years, we didn't have any services for seniors. And so the first thing that we did once we got a little bit of money set aside was to set up this committee on aging. And it's so nice for the elderly to have a place to meet and to get services. Does Bedford have a committee on aging?
Yes, we have a very strong community council on aging. And actually, as planning board, we interface with them a lot because a lot of their goals overlap with ours
Oh,
in helping seniors find houses and staying in town.
oh yeah, yeah. That's a problem here with a lot of development. a lot of the elderly are finding that they might have to move because of the increase in property taxes.
Yeah, we see that a lot in Bedford where, because it is an attractive town, we have the amenities I've talked about, the community feel and the great schools. The housing prices are high. So you have cases where you have seniors that have loved the town, they've been part of the community, and then it's time for them to downsize and they really just can't afford to stay in town with their retirement incomes. And that's unfortunate because they
Just
have to go and start over. Yeah. And the town loses these,
the
real
knowledge.
precious people, the knowledge. So, that's one thing we want to really help keep doing is finding houses that are affordable for people like that. And then on the other side, there's people that they might have grown up in town, they have a tie to town, they went to school here, and you can't afford a house here on a starting salary, right? So they have to leave town and there's kind of a disconnect there. So the idea of, and as select board member, I'll have an opportunity to work this on a different angle in planning board, but create more opportunities for, let's say, reasonably priced houses in town because we keep losing them. There's all these tear downs and just the general housing price has gone way up.
Right, right. Yeah, big issues that hopefully you'll be able to tackle.
Yeah, big and complex issues because in a way, housing prices going up is great for the homeowner, right? Because then when it is time to retire, they have a certain amount of equity. But how can we respect the homeowner and make sure their investment is protected, but also create opportunities for other people that are being lost here?
Right. Around here, we talk about senior housing, like trying to establish more senior housing. I think every developer that comes by, we ask them for a plan of how many of their units they might make for senior houses. So hopefully that we'll have more options as well. But it's a struggle because we love our seniors. They have treasured the town, for most of their life, and then it's sad to hear that they might have to move out to somewhere just because of the affordability, and it doesn't seem fair.
Right. It doesn't seem fair and it's a real loss.
Right.
Whenever someone that's been in town for so long and has been so rooted in town leaves, there's a big hole there.
Right. Right. Yeah, the caring grannies and the elderly carpenters who help with keeping the town running. So our library actually has a whole bunch of shelves in the display area, and those were built by a carpenter, a retired carpenter. He just donated his time, and then we have signs all around town, and he builds them because he's retired and he has all this artistry. And I would be so sad to hear if these people are not able to maintain in town because they contribute so much. Our elderly, they run the knitting circle.
Oh yeah.
They they're usually the people who help with our historical society preserving the costumes from the Civil War and the benches and things. It's they're a treasure to have.
Absolutely. That's a
Yeah,
great word. They're a treasure.
yeah, yeah. And their experience is valuable to the town. Yeah, so I'm glad that you're planning to help all of these different community members.
So those are a couple of the big priorities.
That's great. Great. And how do you plan to campaign? Like, have you set up a web page to accept donations? And are you going to be shaking hands at the local school pep rallies?
So it is it is a good question. And I think some of the how do you campaign has to be a bit to be determined because I want to be very respectful of the COVID situation and the fact that we do have a variant that's, definitely changing people's plans. And we have a lot of people in town that are, immunocompromised or, so I think the traditional shaking hands and kissing babies probably won't be happening. Um, I mean, things change so rapidly, but I'm going to have to figure out what is the best way to campaign in that type of environment. So I do have a Facebook page and encourage everyone to go. It's Shawn for Bedford. So Shawn is SHAWN. I'll be developing a campaign website to go along with that, and you can access that from the Facebook page. I'm still a bit in the early phases of the campaign. But sure, if you're interested in joining, that's the right now the central point, the Facebook page, and that will have information over time on how to get involved, how to donate. Love to have lawn signs and letters to the editor.
I want to buy a t-shirt or a pin.
That's a good idea. I should look into, I hadn't really thought about t-shirts and pins, but
Oh yeah, a hat.
Shawn for Select Board. Yes.
And your slogan.
I don't yet have a slogan, so that's another thing I'm working on. As you see, I have a few big priorities, and I'm just trying to, I haven't been able to distill them into a few words yet, but
There's a lot of big ideas in there.
right.
Well, I think that that's great that you are putting your hat in the ring. It's early yet. I guess people have not fully announced all of the candidates until January 19th, you were saying?
Right. So there in Bedford, there's two ways that you can get on the ballot. You can go through the town caucus, which is my plan, where somebody nominates you and then you accept the nomination and give a speech and say what what you believe in. So I'm actually very honored that our state rep, Ken Gordon, is going to be nominating me.
Wow.
I'm very, very happy to have his support. But if people, and that's January 4th. If people choose not to do that, they can go, I guess, the old fashioned way and collect signatures, and then have them in to the town clerk. So as of the time of this taping, there's only myself and Emily Mitchell, who's an incumbent, that's declared. However, I have come to expect that there probably will be others.
Okay, well, good luck.
Well, thank you.
I think this is great. I guess finally, I wanted to ask you, when you run for select board, what kind of commitment is it in terms of your life? Like, do you have to sit in meetings all day, or do you end up doing votes and campaigning with all the constituents a lot, or is it a big chunk of your time, a big sacrifice?
It can be a decent sized sacrifice. I mean, from what I understand from talking to select board members, past and present, is that usually expect to be in meetings like 3 times during the week. Because it's not just being in the select board meetings, which are held usually twice a month on Mondays. It's you have to kind of be the select board's eyes and ears to other committees as well. So we have the liaison system. So you usually get a bunch of other committee assignments. And then there's the background work to make sure that you studied up on all the issues. So you get the packets of information that you need to bone up on to be intelligent in the meetings. So it can be a fair time commitment. But, you know, I'm doing this, as we mentioned, with a wife and 2 school-age kids. And there have been other select board members that have done that with families. So it certainly isn't out of the reach and shouldn't be out of the reach, I believe, with people that do have, you know, families that occupy a lot of time and also full-time jobs. But I'm prepared, and my family's been very supportive because they know I've wanted to take on this. Planning board itself has its own liaison system and the packets that you have to study. So it's not quite the time commitment as select board, but I'm used to putting in, you know, some type of decent time commitment to the town.
Do you get to be a moderator too if you're a select board? Do you get to hold the gavel?
So the town moderator actually at town meeting is its own elected position. And it traditionally is a former select board member. I'm not usually after they're retired from being select board, because in order to maintain impartiality, you have to step off of your committees. So That's not something I'm really looking at this point. I'm just looking at being a select board member. The select board does have a chairmanship or a chairpersonship that rotates.
Oh,
And at some point, I would get that, probably not in my first term, though. It probably would be several years in before I would actually be running the meetings, because I know there's still a lot to learn, even though I do have a good amount of town government experience. I know there's still some I would have to learn being on the select board before I would be able to take on something like select board chair.
wow. Wow. Well, that's great, but that's the aim eventually.
Sure. I mean, if I'm on the board long enough, and I don't plan on being on the board forever, but I would say probably sometime in my second term, it would come my term to be chairperson, and I would welcome that.
That's fantastic. Our select board chair, his name is George Miller. He's great. He even shows up for our fundraisers. And my last memory of him was being in the dunk tank.
Oh, yeah.
He was a really good sport. He showed up in full suit, and he let us dunk him.
Oh, wow. I think you're going to give people ideas about what to do with our select board members. There
Wow.
is a dunk tank typically at Bedford Day, but I don't recall. So Bedford Day is our town birthday celebration.
Oh, wow.
I don't recall select board members being in there, so I don't know if
Don't get
that's
ideas.
yeah, right.
Well, this is great. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview, Shawn. It's been a pleasure to talk, and I wish you the best in your run for the candidacy of Select Board of
Thank
Bedford.
you very much, Angela. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you.